Hello, welcome to CEC Online Lectures. Today I will start with abduction. No, I'm not talking about kidnapping someone or holding someone hostage. I'm talking about a form of inference that has been used in science and ordinary reasoning for a long time, but not really talked about formally until the end of 20th century when Charles Sanders Peirce wrote an article called Pragmatism and the Logic of Abduction. Suppose you have shifted to a new city to study in the university. You're new to the place, but luckily you find someone from your own city who has taken admission in the same university and is ready to share with you a rented accommodation. So you begin to live together. Now, what happens? You get up in the morning to make breakfast and you notice that the refrigerator door is open. On the kitchen counter, you find an open carton of milk and a half full glass and an open box of chocolate biscuits with crumbs all over, some fallen on the kitchen floor. Your friend is fast asleep. What can you infer? This is the first time you have encountered anything like this, so you cannot use induction. Clearly, someone came into the kitchen at night, took out the milk carton from the fridge, forgot to close its door, forgot to put the half carton back in the fridge, left crumbs all over, did not clean up, and left the open biscuits packet on the counter. You did not do this, and as far as you know, you do not sleepwalk. And even if you did, you are a cleanliness freak, so you would not leave such a mess. The only other person in the house is your flatmate. So you infer that she must have done it. Gosh, you have a tough time ahead, as it seems like being the only daughter, her mother spoiled her to the brink, picking up after her everywhere. Obviously, you did not know that before. Now, such an inference is neither induction nor deduction, but it is abduction, or what we might call inference to the best explanation. Why is this not a deductive inference? Because whatever premises you construct will not guarantee the conclusion. It is possible that your flatmate actually was not the culprit. It is possible that a burglar entered the house, had a snack, and left. It could be that a friend of yours or your flatmates pulled a prank. You would be happy if any of these other was the real reason because you're stuck with her for 3 whole years, as this is what the agreement says. But unfortunately, the best explanation is that your flatmate did it and now you are stuck. Best wishes. Abductive inferences are abundant. Take the Big Bang hypothesis. Since there is only one universe and no one observed the beginning of it, it is surely not an inductive inference, nor can it be deduced deductively. But physicists claim that it is the best explanation of all alternative possible explanations of how the universe began. It could be in the future that someone comes up with a better explanation, so the inference to the Big Bang hypothesis is not a necessary one. Medical science is filled with abduction. Almost 50% of diseases, causes for diseases, cures for diseases, and so on are not known. So inferences by abduction are abundant. There are diseases like miliary tuberculosis for which there is no definitive test. So what doctors do? With a particular set of symptoms, they perform tests to rule out a lot of other diseases that the patient with those symptoms could have. Once they rule out all these possibilities through tests, they conclude that the patient has miliary tuberculosis and treat him for that. If he gets cured, their inference gets a boost. However, the inference is not a deductive one. The conclusion is not guaranteed by the tests that were performed. It is what we can call inference to the best explanation. It is possible that the patient has some other disease, perhaps a disease not even known so far. But the best explanation that medical science at that moment can provide is that of miliary tuberculosis. Also, even though Sherlock Holmes uses the word deduction and deduce, it seems that most murder mysteries are solved by abductive and not by deductive inference. It is the best explanation of all available explanations that someone is pinned down as a murderer. Even if one confesses to a murder, it is no guarantee that he is actually the murderer. All the evidence collected in a case may point beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is the murderer, but one cannot get there by a necessary inference, but only by abduction or best explanation. So, law is another domain like medicine where abduction is the predominant inference used to reach conclusions. So, you see, we continuously use abduction as an inference in our day-to-day life. I'm constantly leaving my specs somewhere and forgetting. So when I look for it, I usually think where was I just before I came to my room? Oh yes, I was in the kitchen cooking tomato soup. So I go to the kitchen and find my specs on the kitchen counter. This is not a deductive inference and it does not always work either, but most often it is the best explanation, so it works. So in order to get at the best explanation, we must keep in mind a few things, and they are: number 1, simplicity. When possible, go with the least complicated explanation, the one that requires the fewest and most direct causal sequences, the fewest claims about what exists, and that speculates about things beyond the evidence as little as possible. Second is coherence. When possible, go with the explanation that's consistent with what we already believe to be true. Third is testability or predictive power. When possible, go with the theory that allows you to make predictions that can be confirmed or disconfirmed. Fourth is comprehensiveness in scope. When possible, go with the explanation that leaves the fewest loose ends, that explains the most and leaves the least unexplained. The first point about simplicity comes from the English medieval philosopher and theologian William of Ockham. He had this fondness for simple solutions. And so the philosophical principle that is named after him is called Occam's razor, which says, entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity, and the simplest solution is most likely the right one. If one has to choose between two competing theories to explain a particular phenomenon, then one must pick out the simpler one, assuming that both theories are otherwise correct and consistent. Let us now sum up the 3 types of inferences. One way to point out the difference among the 3, that is deduction, induction, and abduction, is the following. We distinguish among rules, cases, and results. Rules are universal statements like all humans are mortal. Cases are singular statements like Socrates is human. And results are singular statements like Socrates is mortal. Now let us look at what is perhaps most quoted as an example of deduction. All humans are mortal, which is the rule. Socrates is a human, case. Therefore, Socrates is mortal, which is the result. So in a deduction, we begin with a rule, apply it to a case, and we infer the result. Deduction is also the simplest form of reasoning, the simplest form of inference. Computers and artificial intelligence operate on deduction. Rules are fed in the fabric of a software, cases are next plugged in as input, and we get results as output. It is also claimed today by many in what is called the computational theory of mind that the human mind, in most of its thinking and reasoning, works like a computer. Inputs as cases are processed by rules which are innate in the human mind, and results are produced as outputs. Whereas deduction makes an inference from rule and case to a result, induction makes an inference from case or a series of cases and result to the rule, and in abduction, the inference from result and rule to case. Consider that in a room there is a box on the table with some marbles. You walk into the room and you're told that all the marbles in the bag are red. So you pull out a marble from the bag and make the following deduction. All the marbles in this bag are red. The rule. This is a marble from this bag. Case. Therefore, this marble is red. Result. Now there is another situation in which you walk into the room and see some of the marbles lying on the table next to the bag and some are still in the bag. Now you make an inductive inference. These are marbles from the bag. Case. These marbles are red. Result. Therefore, all the marbles in this bag are red. Rule. On another occasion, you walk into the room, you see an empty bag with red marbles lying next to it, so you make an abductive inference. These marbles are red. Result. All the marbles in this bag are red. Rule. Therefore, these are marbles from the bag. Case. These are standard examples. Let us make them fun examples. You walk into your grandmother's room, who is diabetic but is sitting with a packet of chocolate biscuits and is putting one of them in her mouth, and she smiles at you sheepishly. So you make the deduction. All the biscuits in this packet contain a lot of sugar. Rule. The biscuit in my grandmother's mouth right now is from this packet. Case. Therefore, this biscuit contains a lot of sugar. Result. You shout at her, "Oh my God, don't you know these contain a lot of sugar and you're not supposed to eat sugar?" She smiles and responds, "I only had one, dear." Now, on another occasion, you walk into your grandmother's room and see that there is a half packet of chocolate biscuits near her and one she is putting in her mouth. So you employ an inductive inference. The biscuit in my grandmother's mouth is from the chocolate biscuits packet. Case. This biscuit contains a lot of sugar. Result. Therefore, all the biscuits in the packet contain a lot of sugar. Rule. You shout at her, "Oh my God, you are eating this biscuit which contains a lot of sugar. Don't you know that all the biscuits in this bag contain a lot of sugar?" She smiles and responds, "I have only had a few." Now this time you walk into the room, you see an empty packet of chocolate biscuits and your grandmother ready to put one biscuit in her mouth. So you make an abductive inference. This biscuit contains a lot of sugar. Result. All the biscuits in the chocolate biscuit packet contain a lot of sugar. Rule. Therefore, the biscuit in my grandmother's mouth is from the chocolate biscuit packet. Case. You shout, "Oh my God, the biscuit you are eating contains a lot of sugar. All chocolate biscuits contain a lot of sugar, and the biscuit you are eating is from the chocolate biscuit packet, and you have eaten the whole packet." She smiles and responds, "No, my dear, someone else ate all of them. I only had the last one." So that's about abduction. Okay, now I'll tell you about analogies. We could say that sometimes there are analogical inferences which are neither deductive nor inductive nor abductive. Analogies also serve as a support system for arguments. Have you not witnessed in movies or otherwise that lawyers, while pleading before the judge, use judgments from the past cases in support of the present case? That is what an analogy is. In simple words, it means similarity. Logicians give an important place to analogies or analogical reasoning in the art of argumentation. Of course, it is a great philosophical activity for the one who constructs such analogies for his listeners. Through analogies, one can explain some baffling, complex, or incomprehensible theories or concepts in an easy-peasy manner. Joseph Priestley, a well-known name in the world of science and philosophy, regarded analogy to be our best guide in all philosophical investigations. And all discoveries which were not made by mere accident have been made by the help of analogy. In philosophy, analogy is considered as a heuristic tool, which means that it enables a person to discover or learn something for himself. Now, analogies are used significantly in poetry, drama, law, films, to serve different purposes. In philosophy, an analogy is either employed to illustrate an otherwise ambiguous concept, or it forms an essential part of an argument. Let us see how it can illustrate an otherwise incomprehensible or ambiguous concept. For this, I will take you to the world of Plato. Plato, in order to explain how knowledge is different from mere opinion, uses the analogy of cave. The illustration goes like this. There are men inside a cave, all chained, and in such a manner that they cannot even move their heads. As a result, they cannot see anything except what is in front of them. Now, the only source of light in the dark cave is the fire that burns behind them. And between the fire and the back of the men are kept various kinds of things like statues, pots, animal figures, etc. Now, these men can only see the wall in front of them, and because of the placement of things and fire, they see the reflection of these objects on the wall. Since they have always seen the reflections and the reflections alone in their entire life, for them that is the truth, that is knowledge. But is it really knowledge? Now what happens? One of these men manages to unchain himself and get out of the cave. He initially experiences pain in his eyes, as it is the first time he has come out of the dark in the sun. But after a while, when he gets adjusted to the new environment, he realizes what, where, and how he is, what the truth is, what knowledge is, as he can now distinguish the real from what appeared to be real in the cave. See how brilliantly, with the help of an analogy, Plato clarified the distinction between knowledge and not knowledge. Now, the second use of analogy is when it becomes part of an argument. In the discussion on induction and probability, I gave a detailed account of Pascal's wager. Now, I wish to briefly present the design argument for the existence of God. A watch or a clock, especially a Swiss watch, is a mechanism that is very close to being perfect. The universe is like a watch, an almost perfect mechanism following laws. So, just as there is a watchmaker, there must be a universe maker. And this universe maker is God. When looked at closely, this is not a deductive argument, and surely not an inductive argument. Hence, it must be an abductive argument or an inference to the best explanation. Surely, the universe as a perfect mechanism could have evolved spontaneously, and the laws it follows could be laws of nature. But at least for the theologians at the time, the best explanation was that there must be a universe maker who makes the universe, just as the watchmaker makes the watch. But now, with the progress of astrophysics, this may not be accepted as the best explanation, and a universe created spontaneously by a big bang is considered to be a better explanation than the explanation in terms of a universe maker. But we cannot deny the fact that in the argument, analogy is an integral part. In fact, the argument is all about analogy. It is an inference which leads us to conclude that the universe has a creator. Arguing from analogy is not so easy. The analogy must be a good one. One of the criticisms of the argument from design is that while the clock is perfect or near perfect, the clockmaker, who is a man, is not perfect. Whereas when we talk about God as the universe maker, we are talking about a perfect being. So, the common phrase, don't compare apples to oranges, must always be kept in mind when looking at arguments from analogy or analogical inferences. So, keeping in mind that analogies can sometimes deceive us, we must distinguish between strong and weak analogies. And here are some guidelines. Guideline 1. The more similarities between two domains, the stronger the analogy. Guideline 2. The more differences, the weaker the analogy. Guideline 3. The greater the extent of our ignorance about the two domains, the weaker the analogy. Guideline 4. The weaker the conclusion, the more plausible the analogy. Guideline 5. Analogies involving causal relations are more plausible than those not involving causal relations. Guideline 6. Structural analogies are stronger than those based on superficial similarities. Guideline 7. The relevance of the similarities and differences to the conclusion, that is, to the hypothetical analogy, must be taken into account. Guideline 8. Multiple analogies supporting the same conclusion make the argument stronger. So keep your logical critical antennas always up. This much for today. Thank you for watching. Stay safe.